The moving truck pulled away from our new home on Maple Lane, leaving behind cardboard boxes and the promise of a fresh start. After 3 years of hospitals, therapy sessions, and fighting insurance companies, Willow Creek Estates seemed like paradise. The lawns were perfectly manicured. The houses stood in orderly rows with cheerful flower beds. The community pool sparkled in the distance. It felt safe, the kind of place where my son Caleb could finally heal. "What do you think, buddy?" I asked, watching Caleb survey our new front yard from his wheelchair. His golden retriever Ranger sat patiently beside him, his service vest crisp and official against his golden fur. Caleb did not answer immediately. At 15, he had become more reserved, more cautious since the accident. The spinal injury had changed more than just his ability to walk. "It is quiet," he finally said. "Ranger likes it." He reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, and I noticed his shoulders relax slightly. That was enough for me. Anything that helped Caleb feel secure was worth every penny of our savings. My brother Mark pulled up in his truck as we were surveying the yard. Despite retiring from the K9 unit 2 years ago, he still carried himself like a police officer, alert, observant, watchful. He had been my rock through everything, especially after Caleb's father decided a disabled son was too much responsibility and disappeared from our lives. "Nice neighborhood," Mark said, grabbing a heavy box from the porch. "Bit fancy, though. You sure you are ready for suburban politics?" I laughed. "As long as they leave us alone, we will get along fine." Mark raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had always been perceptive, too perceptive sometimes. We were unpacking the kitchen when the doorbell rang. Ranger immediately stood at attention. He had been trained to alert to sounds Caleb might miss. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and headed for the door. The woman on my porch was immaculately dressed in white capris and a powder blue blouse. Her blonde hair was styled in a perfect bob, not a strand out of place. Her smile was wide but did not quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I am Karen Strickland, president of the Homeowners Association. We are just delighted to have new neighbors." I introduced myself and invited her in for lemonade. Karen stepped inside, her eyes scanning every corner of our half-unpacked living room. Her gaze stopped on Ranger, who had returned to Caleb's side. "Oh," she said, her voice shifting slightly, "you have a large dog." Before I could respond, Caleb wheeled himself forward. "This is Ranger. He is my service dog." Karen's smile tightened. "I see. Well, we do have very strict pet policies in Willow Creek. Dogs over 40 pounds are generally not permitted, and there are additional fees." "Ranger is not a pet," I interrupted gently. "He is a certified service animal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I have all his documentation if you need to see it." Karen's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Of course. I understand completely. Still, you will want to review the HOA covenant. We take pride in maintaining certain standards here." As she spoke, Mark entered the room carrying a box labeled Caleb's Room. He set it down and introduced himself. When Karen learned he was a former K9 officer, her demeanor shifted again. "Law enforcement, how wonderful. We value security highly at Willow Creek." She paused. "Though we do hire our own private security, no need for residents to concern themselves with neighborhood safety." After she left, Mark watched her through the window as she made her way down our walkway, pausing to frown at a small weed near our mailbox. "That one is going to be trouble," he said quietly. I shook my head. "You are paranoid. She is just doing her job." But as I turned back to unpacking, I could not shake the feeling that Karen Strickland's false smile and calculating eyes would feature prominently in our lives. I just did not know how soon, or how terribly, that premonition would come true. The first letter from the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association arrived exactly 2 weeks after we moved in. It was printed on heavy cardstock with an embossed logo at the top. I opened it while making breakfast, expecting a welcome packet or community newsletter. Instead, I found a notice of violation. Residents are reminded that unauthorized animals are strictly prohibited, the letter stated. All pets must be registered with the HOA office and meet size and breed restrictions as outlined in Covenant Section 7.3. I stared at the paper, confused. I had already submitted Ranger's service animal certification to the HOA office. I had explained his status to Karen directly. This had to be a mistake. I called the HOA office immediately. The receptionist sounded bored as she explained that yes, the letter was correct, and yes, we needed to resolve the issue within 7 days or face a fine of $200. But he is a service animal, I insisted. The ADA states clearly that service animals are not subject to pet restrictions. I do not make the rules, ma'am, she replied. You will need to speak with the board. That afternoon, I gathered Ranger's certification papers, his training documentation, and a printed copy of the ADA Service Animal Guidelines. I dropped Caleb off at physical therapy and drove to the HOA office, a small building adjacent to the community clubhouse. Karen was waiting behind a large mahogany desk, her expression neutral but her eyes cold. Mrs. Strickland, I began, there seems to be a misunderstanding about my son's service dog. She held up a hand. There is no misunderstanding. While we are sympathetic to your situation, the HOA covenant was established before the ADA and has certain grandfathered exceptions. That is not how federal law works, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. The ADA supersedes HOA regulations. Ranger is not a pet. He is a medical necessity for my son. Karen's smile was tight. We have had other residents try to exploit service animal loopholes before. People want to keep their dangerous breeds or oversized animals, and suddenly they become emotional support pets. I pushed the documentation across her desk. Ranger is a fully trained service dog. He performs specific tasks related to my son's disability. This is not an emotional support animal situation. Karen barely glanced at the papers. Submit a formal appeal to the board if you wish. Until then, the violation stands. As I gathered my documents, she added, and do keep that animal leashed at all times. We have had reports of aggressive dogs in neighboring communities. Children's safety must come first. I left the office with my hands shaking. This was not just about rules or paperwork. The implication that Ranger, gentle, highly trained Ranger, was dangerous felt deliberately malicious. The next morning, I found a handwritten note tucked into our mailbox. Several neighbors have expressed concern about your large dog. Please keep it confined to your backyard. It was signed simply Management, but I recognized Karen's handwriting from the visitor log I had signed at her office. 3 days later, another official notice arrived, this time citing excessive barking, an absurd claim, as Ranger was specifically trained not to bark except in emergency situations. The day after that, a note about animal waste in common areas, though I always carried waste bags and cleaned up meticulously. She is targeting us, I told Mark over the phone. It is like she has a personal vendetta against Ranger. Document everything, Mark advised. Every letter, every interaction. Take pictures of Ranger on your walks to show he is always leashed and well-behaved. This is harassment and it is illegal. But the situation was already affecting Caleb. He had overheard me on the phone, discussing the latest violation notice. "Is it my fault?" he asked that night as I tucked him into bed. "Are we going to have to move because of Ranger?" "Absolutely not," I assured him, though my stomach knotted with worry. "Ranger is your service dog. He has every right to be here with you. Some people just do not understand the law." Caleb nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. After all he had been through, the accident, the surgeries, the grueling physical therapy, the last thing he needed was to feel unwelcome in our new home. The next day, I noticed neighbors watching us from behind curtains as Caleb and I walked with Ranger. A woman pulled her child closer as we passed. A man retrieved his mail but avoided eye contact. "What is happening?" I wondered aloud to Mark when he visited that weekend. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the neighborhood social media group on his phone. "She is spreading rumors. Look at this." He showed me a post from Karen, not naming us directly but mentioning new residents with an unauthorized large breed dog, and warning parents to remain vigilant, as there had been incidents of aggression in the dog's history. "That is a blatant lie," I gasped. "Ranger has never shown aggression to anyone." Mark's expression was grim. "This is not just pettiness anymore. This is defamation, and it is definitely violating federal disability laws." He pulled out his phone. "I am calling Justin. He works in the district attorney's office now. We need to start building a case." I watched through the window as Caleb sat in the backyard, Ranger's head in his lap. My son's fingers gently stroked the dog's golden fur, his face more peaceful than I had seen it in weeks. These moments of calm were precious, hard-won after months of nightmares and anxiety attacks following the accident. "We are not going anywhere," I said firmly. "This is our home now, and no one, especially not some power-hungry HOA president, is going to take it from us." What I did not know then was how far Karen Strickland was willing to go to prove me wrong. The morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for Caleb to practice using his new forearm crutches. His physical therapist had suggested daily short walks to build strength, with Ranger providing balance support on his left side while Caleb used a crutch on his right. "Ready for an adventure?" I asked, helping him secure Ranger's specialized mobility harness. Caleb nodded, determination setting his jaw. These walks were difficult for him, physically painful and mentally taxing, but he never complained. At 15, he was fighting to regain independence with a courage that humbled me daily. We chose a route around the neighborhood pond, a flat pathway with benches where Caleb could rest if needed. Ranger walked perfectly positioned at Caleb's side, matching his pace exactly, stopping when Caleb stopped, moving when Caleb moved. The dog's training had cost more than my car, but watching them work together made every penny worthwhile. We had made it halfway around the pond when I noticed Karen Strickland on her front porch. Her house overlooked the community green space, a stately colonial with white columns and perfectly trimmed hedges. She was watering potted plants, but her attention was clearly fixed on us. "Maybe we should turn back," I murmured, noticing how she set down her watering can with deliberate slowness. "I am not tired yet," Caleb insisted, "and this is public space. We have every right to be here." Pride surged through me at his words. After everything he had endured, my son was finding his voice again. I would not take that from him. We continued our walk, passing directly in front of Karen's house. I nodded politely in her direction, determined to be civil despite the mounting tension of recent weeks. Karen did not return the gesture. Instead, she descended her porch steps and marched across her lawn toward us, her face contorted with what could only be described as disgust. "I have told you repeatedly," she called out, not bothering to lower her voice, "that dog is not permitted in common areas." I moved slightly in front of Caleb, instinctively protective. "Mrs. Strickland, as I have explained multiple times, Ranger is a service animal protected by federal law. We have every right to be here." Her face flushed red. "I have had enough of your attitude. You move into our peaceful community and immediately start flouting the rules that everyone else follows." "We are not flouting any rules," I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm. "Ranger is a medical necessity for my son. The law is very clear on this." Karen's eyes narrowed as she pointed at Ranger. "That animal has been seen unleashed. It has been reported as aggressive. It is a liability to this community." "That is not true," Caleb interrupted, his voice shaking slightly. "Ranger has never been aggressive. He is always leashed except in our backyard." Karen turned her glare on my son, and something in me went cold. No adult had the right to look at a disabled child with such contempt. "Young man, this does not concern you," she snapped. "Actually, it concerns him directly," I countered, anger rising in my chest. "Ranger is his service dog. Caleb depends on him for mobility assistance and medical alerts." By now, a few neighbors had emerged from their homes, watching the confrontation from a distance. No one approached, no one intervened. Karen took a step closer, pointing her finger inches from my face. "I know people like you. You think the rules do not apply to you. You think you can use your son's condition to get special treatment." The accusation was so outrageous, so cruel that for a moment I could not speak. In that instant of stunned silence, Karen made a decision that would change everything. She turned toward Ranger and, with deliberate force, kicked him directly in the ribs. The sound that followed, Ranger's yelp of pain and confusion, Caleb's scream of horror, seemed to echo across the water. Ranger stumbled, momentarily collapsing onto his side. Without his support, Caleb lost balance and fell to his knees on the pathway. Time fractured. Everything moved both too quickly and in terrible slow motion. I dropped to the ground between my son and his dog, not knowing which to comfort first. Ranger, trained never to leave Caleb's side even when injured, was already struggling to stand again, whimpering softly. Caleb's breathing came in sharp, panicked gasps, the beginning of an anxiety attack. His fingers clutched at Ranger's fur, seeking the comfort and security that had just been violently disrupted. I looked up at Karen, who stood over us with cold satisfaction on her face. "Now you can see how unsafe that animal is," she announced loudly, clearly performing for the gathering audience of neighbors. "It nearly knocked the boy down." "You kicked him," I shouted, disbelief making my voice crack. "You deliberately hurt a service animal. That is a federal crime." Karen scoffed. "It lunged at me. I defended myself." She turned toward the onlookers. "You all saw it. The dog was aggressive." But her performance was not as convincing as she hoped. Several neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. One woman covered her mouth in shock. They had seen what happened. They knew the truth. Yet no one spoke up. No one contradicted her. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Mark. As it rang, I cradled Caleb against me, trying to slow his breathing while keeping a protective hand on Ranger. "Mark," I choked out when he answered. "She kicked Ranger. She actually kicked him. Caleb is having a panic attack. Ranger is hurt. I do not know what to do." Mark's voice was instantly alert, shifting into crisis mode. "Where are you?" By the pond, in front of her house. Do not move. Do not say anything else to her. I am on my way. Call Dr. Patterson to meet us at the animal hospital. I will be there in 10 minutes. As I hung up, Karen was already retreating to her porch, her point made, her damage done. She looked back once, her expression a disturbing mixture of triumph and disdain, before disappearing into her house. With gentle hands, I examined Ranger. He winced when my fingers probed his ribcage, but there was no obvious deformity. No blood. Small mercies. His brown eyes looked up at me with utter confusion. His training had never prepared him for being attacked while performing his duties. "It is okay, boy," I whispered, my tears falling onto his golden fur. "We are going to get you help. You did nothing wrong." I turned to Caleb, whose breathing was still rapid but no longer dangerously so. "Can you stand, sweetheart? We need to get Ranger to the vet." A neighbor, Mrs. Collins from 3 doors down, finally approached. "Do you need help?" she asked quietly, her eyes darting nervously toward Karen's house. "Please," I said. "My son cannot walk back without his service dog's support." She helped me get Caleb to his feet, supporting his weight as I carefully lifted Ranger. The dog was heavy, but adrenaline gave me strength I did not know I possessed. As we made our slow way back toward our house, I heard whispers from the gathered neighbors. I caught fragments. "She actually kicked it. The poor boy. Someone should report her." But whispers would not heal Ranger's ribs. Whispers would not calm Caleb's fears. Whispers would not bring justice. For that, we would need something much stronger. And as Mark's truck screeched to a halt in front of our house, I knew the battle had only just begun. The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo. Ranger lay still on the examination table as Dr. Patterson gently palpated his ribcage, the dog's eyes never leaving Caleb, who sat in his wheelchair nearby. My son's face was pale, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. "Good news," Dr. Patterson finally announced. "No broken ribs. He has significant bruising and will be sore for several days, but there is no serious internal damage." I exhaled in relief as she continued. "He is an exceptionally well-trained animal. Most dogs would have responded defensively to that kind of attack. The fact that he remained calm speaks to his exceptional training." She looked directly at me. "I hope you are filing a report. This was a deliberate assault on a service animal." "We are handling it," Mark assured her from where he stood by the door, his posture rigid with controlled anger. Since arriving at the scene, he had been making calls, taking photographs of Ranger's injury, and collecting witness statements from the few neighbors willing to speak up. After filling Ranger's pain medication prescription, we returned home. Caleb refused to leave Ranger's side, so we set up a makeshift bed for him next to the dog's cushion in the living room. Both were finally sleeping when Mark motioned me into the kitchen. "We need to talk strategy," he said, his voice low. "This is not just an HOA dispute anymore. This is criminal." I nodded, still struggling to process the day's events. "She kicked him, Mark. She deliberately hurt an animal that was just doing his job." "I know, and there are serious consequences for that." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through a legal document. "Interfering with a service animal is a federal offense under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is also animal cruelty under state law. And given that it happened in front of Caleb and triggered a panic attack, we could argue emotional distress as well. What do we do first?" "I have already filed a report with Animal Control. Tomorrow morning, we go to the police station and file formal charges. My friend Justin in the DA's office is waiting for the paperwork." Mark reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. In the meantime, we install these hidden security cameras, high definition, motion activated with night vision. He placed 4 identical units on the table, one for the front door, one for the back, one facing the street, and one overlooking the side yard where Caleb and Ranger usually play. You think she will come back? Try something else. The thought made my stomach clench. People like Karen do not back down. They escalate. We need to be prepared. That night after Mark left and the house was quiet, I sat beside Caleb's makeshift bed, watching my son sleep with his arm draped protectively over Ranger. The dog opened his eyes briefly, looking up at me with complete trust despite what had happened. It broke my heart. I promise, I whispered to both of them, this will never happen again. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Mark arrived early to install the security cameras while I took Caleb and Ranger to the police station. The officer who took our statement was professional but visibly disturbed by our account. Service animal interference is taken very seriously, she explained, especially when it involves physical violence. As we provided our statement, Mark received a call from one of his former K9 unit colleagues, Officer Rodriguez, who now worked in community outreach. She wanted to visit, officially. That afternoon, Officer Rodriguez arrived in full uniform, her police SUV parked prominently in front of our house. Neighbors peered from windows as she knelt to examine Ranger, speaking gently to Caleb about his service dog's training. "I would like to see your certification documents," she said, loud enough for anyone watching to hear. "Service animals have specific legal protections in this state." As we showed her Ranger's paperwork, I noticed Karen's curtains twitching across the street. The message was clear. Law enforcement was involved now. Officer Rodriguez stayed for nearly an hour, deliberately visible to the neighborhood. Before leaving, she handed me her card. "Call me directly if there are any further incidents, and tell your brother the K9 unit is having a barbecue next week. We would love to see him and meet this brave dog properly." The next day, Karen launched her counterattack. A new HOA newsletter appeared in every mailbox, featuring an article about recent animal incidents and new proposed restrictions on dangerous breeds. Though no names were mentioned, the implication was clear. Mark read it and shook his head. She is digging herself deeper. This is documented evidence of targeted harassment. That afternoon, Karen attempted to visit the HOA office, only to find Officer Rodriguez and another uniformed officer waiting with my brother. The meeting was brief. Karen emerged looking shaken, her usual confidence visibly rattled. "What happened?" I asked Mark later. They served her with formal notice of the investigation. She tried to claim Ranger attacked her, but Officer Rodriguez is a certified K9 trainer. She knows aggressive dog behavior when she sees it, and when someone is lying about it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of hope. The system was working. The truth was being heard. But our battle was far from over. That evening, an anonymous complaint was filed with Animal Control, claiming Ranger had been seen without a leash, snapping at children near the playground. Another lie. Ranger had not left our yard except for his vet visit. "She is getting desperate," Mark observed. "This is good. Desperate people make mistakes." He was right.